In this video, I'm going to talk about default arguments. But before starting default arguments, we want to make sure that we know what arguments are. Arguments are variables or literals that are passed into a function when the function is called. Let me show you by using an example. I'm going to write a function that gets two arguments. One argument for length and the second one is for width. And this function is going to return the area of a rectangle. For that, I'm going to write definition for two variables and let them be double. And now I'm going to write a function that is going to return the area, the multiplication of length and width. So return type is going to be double get area. This is the name of a function, and it's going to take two arguments. So since we are working with double, the variables of double type, the data type of a parameter or parameters will be double. So let's say L double width, and we are going to return the multiplication of L and W. And now we are going to call this function. How do we call a function? We are going to write the name of a function, and we are going to pass length and width as arguments. Length and width. And don't forget about the prototype. How do we write a prototype? We write the return type of a function, double, the name of a function, and the data types of the parameters that we are using. So in this case, it's double, double. And I want to show this on the console. See out area. And when I run the program, it's going to print out area 200. Here, let's make it only one, and let me run the program. And here is the result. Area is 200. So what is happening here? I'm going to take a screenshot of this code. So here, this is a function definition, and here is the function call. This is our function call, and the variables length and width, they are passed to the function call, and these variables are called arguments. And when we run the program, when the compiler comes to this statement, there is a function call and the arguments are length and width, and it will branch to this function. And there are two parameters. These are parameters, and these variables are defined in the function header. And L is a parameter, and it's going to take a copy of length. So the copy of length which is 20. So the value of L is going to be 20. W is going to take a copy of width. So the value of W is going to be 10, and it's going to return the multiplication of L and W, which is 200, and it's going to be returned to the place where it was called. So on the console, it's going to print out area and 200. So here, length and width, they are passed as arguments into a function call. Then they are called arguments. And the parameters, they are taking the copies of arguments, and they are called parameters, or you can call parameter variables. So now, since we know what arguments and what parameters are, I'm going back to the code blocks. So now let's talk about default arguments. What are default arguments? So sometimes if you want or need, you can leave out arguments. And when we do so, since the function is taking 2 arguments, the compiler is going to show you an error. Now I'm going to rerun this program. It's working fine. But now I'm going to leave these 2 arguments and run the program again. As you can see, there is an error showing that. Why? Because in the function definition, you are taking 2 parameters, but you are not using 2 arguments, and this is an error. So when the arguments are left out of the function call, we can take advantage of default arguments. So what are default arguments? Default arguments are literal values or constants with an assignment operator in front of them appearing after the data types which are passed to the parameter when the actual arguments are left out of the function call. And the default arguments are usually listed in the function prototype. So now I'm going to come to the prototype of a function and use this assignment operator and write my default arguments. So for example, here 10 and here 15. So when I run the program, since we have left out both of the arguments, the double arguments will be passed to the parameter variables. So the parameter L will take the value of 10 and the parameter W is going to take the value 15, and 10 times 15 is going to be 150. So let me run the program again. Since we don't have here arguments, it's going to take the default arguments, which are usually defined in the function prototype, and 10 times 15 is 115. So let's remember, default arguments are only used when the actual arguments are omitted from the function call. But do we have to omit all arguments? No, we don't have to. We can omit them partially. So for example, I am going to specify the first argument but leave out the second argument. So let's say 5. So 5 is going to be the first the argument for length, and I'm leaving out the width argument. And when I run the program, we are going to have 75. So what is 75? It's 5. 5 is specified, the first argument is specified, but we left out the second one. So the second one will be taken from the default argument. So 5 times 15 is going to be 75. So what happens if I specify the second argument as well? For example, comma and 5. What happens? Let me run the program. As you can see, the result is area 25. What is happening here? All the default arguments can be overridden normally. So meaning we can specify both of the arguments, and when we do so, the preference will be always given to the actual arguments. And if there is no actual argument, then default argument will be passed to the parameter. Since we have specified both of the arguments, and the preference will be given to the actual arguments. But if there is no arguments at all, or one of them is missing, then the value of default argument will be taken. So in the beginning of the video, I told that default arguments usually appear in the function prototype. But what if you don't have a prototype? So then you can cut and paste the function definition to the part to the part before it's called and specify default arguments in the function header. So I'm going to cut it and paste it before it's called and specify my default arguments here. For example, 90 and 90. Let me run the program. So the output is 25. Why? Because right now I have actual arguments. So let me get rid of them and let me run again. Then we are going to have 8100. So there are 2 points that you have to know. If you want to pass default arguments, then they should be assigned in the earliest occurrence of the function name. And usually it's a function prototype. And the second one, you have to know that if you pass actual arguments, then default arguments will be overwritten. Default arguments are easy to use, but there is one downside of using, and the downside of using them is that when you want to leave out the argument in a function call, then you have to leave all the arguments that come after it. So for example, if I want to leave out the length, but I want to specify the width, for example 30, this is illegal. So when we run the program, as you can see, it doesn't accept this. It wants you to specify the first argument as well, or you have to leave both of these arguments. So now it's working properly. So it's possible for a function to have some parameters with the default arguments and some without, but there is only one restriction. When an argument is left out of a function call, then all arguments that come after it must be left out as well.